Eastern Line encounter. This first passage is from Ruppelt's book.
In the early hours of July 24, the DC-3 was at 5,000 feet. The night was very clear with a full moon. The plane was flying over Alabama towards Atlanta at about 2:45 a.m. when the flight was 20 miles southwest of Montgomery. The captain, Childs, saw a light dead ahead and closing fast. His first reaction, he later reported to an attic investigation team, was that it was a jet. But in an instant, he realized that even a jet couldn't close as fast as its light was closing. Charles said he reached over, gave Whitted a quick tap on the arm and pointed. The UFO was now almost on top of them. Charles hacked the DC-3 into a tight left turn just as the UFO flashed by about 700 feet to the right. The DC-3 hit turbulent air. Whitted looked back just as the UFO pulled up in a steep climb. Both pilots had gotten a good look at the UFO and were able to give an adequate description of it to the Air Force intelligence staff. It looked like a B-29 fuselage. No wings though. The underside had a deep blue glow. There were 2 rows of windows from which bright lights glowed, and a bright tail of orange-red flame shot out the back. Only one passenger was looking out the window at the time. The attic investigators talked to him. He said he saw a strange, eerie streak of light, very intense, but that was all, no details. He said that it all happened before he could adjust his eyes to the darkness.
The pilots landed in Atlanta at 3:49 a.m. Newspaper reporters talked to the crew, who rejected the suggestion that they had seen a meteor. What they had just seen was a man-made thing, they insisted. The Pentagon tried to apply the balloon excuse, which just led to further discredit in any balloon explanation, as their lack of criteria was apparent. It was like the overuse of a bad joke. The Air Force learned that the object had been seen from the ground from another source. An observation of a craft from the same format was also observed in The Hague, Holland, on the same very day, albeit earlier. The description also closely matches a development from the V2 rockets that was seen in Scandinavia. This sighting was crucial to motivate a new estimate of the situation. Members of the project's design were convinced that the timing was good to write one at that point. The new estimate of the situation, in Rupert's words,
it was a rather thick document with a black cover, and it was printed on legal-sized paper, stamped across the front with the words, "Top Secret." The document pointed out that the reports hadn't actually started with the Arnold incident. Related reports from a weather observer in Richmond, Virginia, who observed a silver disk through his theodolite telescope, an A47 pilot and 3 pilots in his formation who saw a silver flying wing, and the English ghost airplanes that had been picked up on radar early in 1947 proved this point. Although reports on them were not received until after the Arnold sighting, these incidents all had taken place earlier. When the estimate was completed, typed and approved, it started up through channels to higher command echelons. It drew considerable comment, but no one stopped it on its way up. It got to the late General Hoyt S. Vandenberg, then Chief of Staff, before it was battered back down. The General wouldn't buy interplanetary vehicles. The report lacked proof. A group from Attic went to the Pentagon to bolster their position, but had no luck. The Chief of Staff just couldn't be convinced. The estimate died a quick death. Some months later, it was completely declassified and relegated to the incinerator. A few copies, one of which I saw, were kept as mementos of the golden age of the UFOs. The top Air Force Command's refusal to buy the interplanetary theory didn't have any immediate effect upon the morale of Project Sign, because the reports were getting better. The estimate was ordered to be declassified, but the document should be all burned. That is rather a contradictory proposal. If the document was irrelevant, why not make it public? Why would you burn it?
Ruppelt then goes on to explain away several cases of dogfights, giving balloons as a reason for all of them. Then a few pages later, Ruppelt comments upon the Project Sign fate.
By the end of 1948, Project Sign had received several hundred UFO reports. Of these, 107 had been saved as good reports. About 3 dozen were unknown. Even though the UFO reports were getting better and more numerous, the enthusiasm over the interplanetary idea was cooling off. The same people who had fought to go to Godman AFB to talk to Colonel Hicks and his UFO observers in January now had to be prodded when a sighting needed investigating. More and more work was being pushed off onto the other investigative organisation that was helping ATIC. The kickback on the top secret estimate of the situation was beginning to dampen a lot of enthusiasm. It was definitely a bear market for UFOs.
The estimate of the situation was a document based on the database available at that time. The conclusion for the artificiality and celestial origin of the phenomenon was justifiable, though Vandenberg's position could be seen from multiple perspectives. Some might argue that his demand for physical remains of an aircraft was reasonable, but then, if such evidence existed, the report would likely be unnecessary. Visual contact and radar signals of UFOs, along with speed and height measurements by theodolite and other instruments, supported Project Sign's plausible conclusions. Though not proof, the report was a legitimate estimate under unproven circumstances. One could speculate that the limited methodology at the time was in question, specifically how solidly the case for extraterrestrial origin could be substantiated. There was also a shared understanding, seen through the writings of Ruppelt and Hynek, that the Air Force aimed to maintain a scientific facade in its public decisions in line with the spirit of the time. However, if this were truly the case, the military establishment might have delegated the task to scientists rather than military personnel. Others speculated that Vandenberg and other high-ranking officials already suspected the interplanetary nature of UFOs. In this light, the report could have served as a gauge for how the phenomenon might unfold. Kevin Randle initially considered Vandenberg's position reasonable. I would argue, how so? However, in his more recent work, UFOs in the Deep State, Randle adopted a more decisive stance regarding Vandenberg. He concluded that Vandenberg was deliberately impeding progress on the issue, acting as a representative of a privileged group with hidden agendas, stonewalling research, foot-dragging, or using diversionary tactics. This evolution in Randle's thinking better aligns with the broader pattern. Vandenberg was signaling the preferred stance for his subordinates, subtly shaping the path and conclusions they were expected to follow. These actions revealed much about the environment surrounding UFO research. The message sent was clear. Supporting a specific position would bring consequences, suggesting that such conclusions were discouraged and perhaps stigmatized or even taboo. Consequently, military personnel aiming for career advancement steered clear of these conclusions.
They wrote the estimate with conviction. It pointed towards something structured, and not from here. General Vandenberg dismissed it without ceremony. The pattern would remain, but belief would not.